buy the biggest furniture for it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter of how much of an expert or how much I've learned over the years. I will never get the size right on any furniture I ever buy. So I'm just banned now. I'm not allowed to buy any more. I'm done.
It's hard. Scale is hard.
I agree. Thank you. You can call him up after this.
No, it is hard. Even if you put together, I always say, like, even if there's a floor plan being done and put together, I'm always like so cautious and say to the client, like, tape it out. You know, I'm there measuring it out, because you can see it on paper and it looks one way, but it's always different in the space. So I kind of I like to kind of do things in a step-by-step process too, which, you know, I like to take my time with it to kind of like, you know, like, let's get this is the look and feel, let's get the rug and the couch in, then let's go with the couch. Like, I kind of like staging it that way, because I think that we do change our minds or be able to see the scale and everything as we go with it. So, you know, don't be afraid. People don't have to do it all at once.
Totally. Do you recommend people living in their spaces before fully designing it?
For sure. I really do.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it changes.
Sorry, go.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, even for myself, it was like the area, and Britt will know it, the back of the house where we park and walk in. Yeah. I was like, well, I'm going to put a bench there, and, you know, and then I realized I just left it for a long time. And then I realized, no, I don't want like the kids coming in and dumping their stuff and that being the entry closet. So now I put a console there so that they can't do that. But if my first instinct would have been to put the bench and do that, have it, I think how you live in the space, I definitely think live in it for a bit. Yeah.
And Joe, you're currently building a new house right now, which is, you know, so different when you're actually doing it for yourself and not for a client.
The funny thing that we're talking about this, because I called Brittany actually yesterday, because there was a design dilemma that I was going through. There is a specific design I want for the fireplace, but it's so intricate that the only way to reduce the cost is to have the electric fireplace in there versus the gas fireplace. And my heart, I spent so much time, you know, designing the specs of the fireplace, and thinking that, you know what, we'll put the gas in if the budget allows. But after looking at all the gas fireplaces, we're just like, the budget's not going to allow this to have both the gas and the design that I want. So what do I want more? Do I want the gas fireplace, or do I want the design that I spent so much time on? And I really wanted the design at first. So we thought about maybe just doing the electric. I called Brittany and ran through some scenarios, and at the end, we decided that we were just going to do the gas, because the emotion when we see a real flame, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. So I'm not saying don't like electric. In our particular situation, both Tony and I really love the gas because of the real flame. And we don't want to be sitting there 2 months later or 2 years later down the road thinking we should put a gas fireplace in, you know? So the whole thing about it is like, do I sacrifice the emotion that the fire gives me, or do I sacrifice the design? And at the end, I'm going to sacrifice the design, because the design can change. The emotion about the real fire will not change. And so I'm back to the drawing board. I'm back to drawing certain specs that will allow us to have a gas fireplace. And I just have to be a little bit more creative, you know, with what we're going to use. But I think in any design aspect, you're going to have to question and ask yourself and talk it through, and call somebody and talk it through. Like, will my emotion, my feeling to this particular design piece change, you know, years down the line? Or will I forget about this design and then change it up a little bit later, which most people do design every 3 months, right? So
Yeah. Well, and especially even more so now.
yeah.
Like every 3 days. Or what are people reorganizing or changing a paint color? Like I'm 100% one of those people right now.
I
So.
think that's a quarantine effect though.
I think
right?
it is too. I actually think it is too. So it went down. It went from 3 months to 3 days. But yeah, the emotional aspect of any type of design is so huge, regardless. So you, because you're building a house, you have to now sort of sit down and visualize what's going to be the most important factor, because you can't sit there and look at the fireplace because you're doing it on paper right now. So I think that emotional piece is so important, whether you're sitting in the room or sitting there and visualizing what it's actually going to be and how you're going to feel. So no, I think that's good. These are all good conversations. Glenn, I know you had a couple questions. I won't take over the whole entire interview as per normal.
No, and actually, I mean, I got a couple questions just through Instagram and then an email from somebody as well. Maybe we'll just bat this email out of the way, because you guys might not know, you might not have this info, because it seems like it might be questions more for a home stager, but somebody was interested if there is somewhere in Vancouver that they can rent large pieces of artwork on a short-term basis. Do you guys have any, I mean, I'm sure that there probably is, but are you guys in tune with that side of things, like renting furniture and that sort of stuff? Or is it just client to client and designing the space for like an end user type?
Oh, Jen's talking in Vancouver Art Gallery rents artwork. I didn't know that actually, but there you go, Vancouver Art Gallery. I do, this is probably a bad thing to say, but I will go to HomeSense,
yeah,
buy things, and they have a 30-day return. And even if you're past sometimes the 30 days, you can still return it. So I have done a couple staging projects that it was more economical for the client for us to actually buy the items, and they just actually kept them and resold them than some of the renting. But there's like Fluff Design. I mean, there are design companies that do strictly, but yeah, I used even HomeSense for my own home in just bringing in some neutral pieces. It's a great option because they have such a mix of styles and things like that. So, and I guess it depends how fast the home sells too.
Yeah, true. And your segments actually deal with a lot of that that you do on TV as well too, right? Where you're and doing things like that. And you can actually find some really great pieces for not that much money that look great. You just the thing is you have to search.
You have to search, and it is good for a staging. Yeah. It is good, but there are companies, definitely, that come in and they rent it kind of by the month, right? So yeah.
Would you ever suggest artwork in a space, or is it more about a nice piece of art would look good there with maybe these colors or something like that, or do you guys have that type of an in-depth conversation with people as it pertains to artwork?
I know for myself, I used to shy away from it, to be honest, but exactly for that reason, was that art is personal. And I mean, I have my own personal taste with it. Now I do try and suggest it as, part of the whole design plan. Or I will recommend, I'm really big, I really like supporting local artists. And so for myself, I will always, I'm just thinking of a couple projects that, pre-quarantine and still working on now, where I would send them different artists that I think, okay, this could work within their, one's a very Scandinavian style, so okay, what artists, local artists, would their work within that, and try and suggest that. But I do leave that decision ultimately up to them, because I do believe art is like evokes a personal emotion. But I do now suggest it more than I think I did before, but I try and keep it local as much as possible and get them to decide, because I think it is like an emotional reaction, right? So
yeah, that makes sense.